Like, this isn't the date for me to be discussing that with you. Give me your information, I'll see what it is.
Well, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Are we excited for the continuation of the introduction to Leviticus?
Boy, howdy.
Again, I'll tell you, good job last week.
Thank you. I had fun.
You know, I counted one time in where the Lord through Moses said to the Pharaoh, 12 times let my people go that they may worship me or serve me, and that's the number of government. So it doesn't stand to reason that the minute they come out, he starts telling them the ways he wants to be worshipped.
Yeah. Yeah. He has a plan. Okay, so we are starting today in Exodus. We have the very end of Exodus 27 at the beginning of this portion. So Exodus 27:20 is where we're starting, and we're going through 30:10. So, and I always think it's funny when the portion starts with also, and it's like, I think we should have left that with the last one, but I'm not in charge. That's fine. But it starts out with it kind of picks up right where it left off. So we left off last week with kind of some of these elements of the tabernacle. We're in the middle of instruction about the tabernacle, and this week we're going to get into the priests and the consecration of them. And then we're going to end with the incense altar, which I'm actually really excited about because I have some fun things to share about that. So, but we start out with this little paragraph about this olive oil for light that is to burn continually. So, and I mentioned in the message last week, so synagogues and many traditional churches all have this kind of ever-burning light, eternal lamp. They call it different things. And that is actually directly based off of this instruction that there's to always be light in the tabernacle. So it's kind of one of the only practices that's directly tied to the tabernacle. Of course, there's kind of concepts and ideas that are kind of drawn from it, but it's kind of the most directly related practice that is still happening, actually, is to have that eternal lamp in sacred spaces. So in synagogues, they always have one where there's a Torah scroll. So like when I was in Europe last year, and we were visiting some synagogues through Poland and Germany, we visited a synagogue in Germany that is in a town in Germany where there is no Jewish population anymore. They all were taken away or left at World War II, which is very sad. So there's no Torah scroll in that synagogue. And so there's no eternal lamp in that synagogue. So it's usually they're connected. So if you go into a synagogue and there's not that usually means there's not a scroll. It's not an active synagogue, basically, which is kind of interesting. So, but anyway, and it is interesting that it's one of those, that light is one of those things that is present in both traditions, in both Jewish tradition and Christian tradition. So that one has carried through. And we'll actually talk a little bit more about the light when we get to the incense altar at the end. So, but let's get into kind of the biggest part of this portion, which is about the priesthood, about the garments of the priests and the consecration of the priests. So there's so many things that we could talk about. I don't know that we'll get down into the weeds of all of them, but so basically, I'm not going to read all of it, but basically, there's these very specific things that are part of the garments for Aaron, and it really stuck out to me this time in Exodus 28:2. At the very beginning of this instruction, it says, "You are to make holy garments for your brother Aaron, for splendor and for beauty." So it's it's one of the things I like about the tabernacle too, is that it's not all just utilitarian. That beauty has value as well, and it goes on to talk about the skilled artists who are supposed to make these garments, which also connects to making the curtains. And we have the passage too about what are their names? The artisans that are filled with the Spirit. It talks about that are, I don't remember what verse that's in, but it talks about them being filled with the Spirit to be able to be the artists basically and instruct with the building of the tabernacle. So there is this connection between worship and beauty, and between this order that the Lord is creating, and it's still supposed to be beautiful. So, and there's like it's the Spirit that is in the midst of it as they're creating all of these things, which I think is really interesting, because I think there used to be somebody I used to tell people that I'm not creative. And I used to know someone who would be very annoyed with me when I would say that. I'm just like, you are creative, because we're made in the image of God, and God is creative. So there's this creativity, but creativity looks different ways, and I have since come to understand that better and see that just because I don't like to draw or paint does not mean I'm not creative. So I've come through that, but still I like this. There seems to be a lot of creativity here. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a tradition, I don't know that I can explain it real well, but in Judaism, that you're to beautify all the commandments, like Shabbat, you're to use your best china and for the meal, and whatever you do, you're to seek a way to beautify it.
And there's this idea of like, and it's also kind of connected to, sometimes we talk about bringing, well, of course we know when we get into the sacrifices, the first fruits, firstborn animals, all these things are significant. So bringing the first and the best. And so it's kind of related to that as well. It's like you use your best things, whether it's, using your nicer things for Shabbat, not eating Shabbat dinner off of paper plates maybe, which if you eat Shabbat dinner off of paper plates, that's fine. I'm not condemning anybody there. I'm just explaining the point of but it's like this idea of bringing the best before the Lord also, or giving the best to the Lord, and for that sanctified time and space also. So it goes on and starts to talk about the specifics of all of these garments that are made for Aaron, and there's multiple. It's interesting that there are multiple ways that. There's a couple different times when the names of the tribes are engraved. So there's one in verse 9 that says, "You are to take 2 onyx stones and engrave on them the names of Bnei Israel, 6 of their names on one stone, and the names of the remaining 6 on the other, in the order of their birth." And then they're to be fastened in verse 12. "Fasten the 2 stones upon the shoulder pieces of the ephod to be memorial stones before Bnei Israel." And then if you keep going, it talks about the breastplate, and there's these different, there's 12 specific stones that are mentioned, and it says the stones are to be engraved, and then verse 21, the stones are to be engraved in the order of the names of Bnei Israel, 12 according to their names, like the etchings of the signet seal, 1 corresponding to each of the 12 tribes. So the 12 tribes are represented on Aaron's garments in 2 ways, or twice, I guess you could say. So it's interesting because it makes me think, one of the things that it makes me think of, and we can open it up and see what else people want to comment about these stones or these garments. But it's, especially when it talks about that they're to be memorial stones, and then it says, so Aaron is to bear their names before Adonai on his shoulders as a reminder. So in some sense, it's this kind of this symbolic, he's carrying all of the people with him when he's going in to minister in the tabernacle. So like we've talked about, it's like the people, there's this structure where only certain people can go in certain places in the tabernacle, but it doesn't mean that anyone is any less involved or less important or less a part of the worship, the sacrifice, the presence of the Lord. And even here, it's like, even though, all these people from these other tribes would not physically themselves be able to go into even the inner court or the Holy of Holies, they're still carried with him. So it's as if they're all going together. It's this representation of the whole nation of people going before the presence of the Lord together. And I like that in one, with the 2 onyx stones, it's, yes, they're listed in birth order, but they're both just listed on these 2 same stones. And so it's showing this kind of unity, this they're all part of one in some sense. I think there's a practical aspect to all 12 of their names probably wouldn't fit on one stone, and especially if you're going to wear it on, like, it's a practical kind of thing in my mind. But then but on the breastplate, it's 12 different stones, and so it's this distinction. It's that they each have their own identity, their own role to play, their own place in the community, but they're still all together and represented together as Aaron is going in. So those are some of the things that stick out about that. Anybody else have any other comments? Yeah.
So it lists the stones in order, but it doesn't match them up to the tribes.
No.
So the fascination is, well, is that because one tribe was not valued greater than another tribe? Why would you list the stones in order and not match that up with the tribes? Because some of these stones are certainly more valuable than other stones.
Yeah.
So that's always been kind of a curiosity.
Yeah.
It's kind of left out. Well,
Maybe the value is our human assessment of value. Maybe God doesn't value them any differently.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of theories about that and how we would know, but I don't know. Yeah, he didn't choose to say this. He didn't choose to give us the table that lines them all up, and so we don't know. We don't know how God decided to do that or how they interpreted that exactly, but it is interesting because they are. But it's interesting because it's also like, but also so there is this element of like, we do value different stones differently, usually based on how common or uncommon they are. So I don't know if there's anything into like how, if in the ancient world, there was definitely like different values for different things, but if that would be exactly the same as it is now, or what. So I don't know.
Is it possible that it doesn't matter?
It is possible that it doesn't matter. I think what matters is that there's 12 different ones. I think that to me that's the emphasis, is that they're all different, and they would all be, even just at a glance, different. It's not even, they would just all be so different from one another. Not even like, if you have to, because sometimes there are multiple stones that are the same color. And so sometimes, unless you look really closely, you can't tell. But it doesn't seem like that's the case here. I don't remember who was first over here. Somebody was. Faith, I think.
I don't know what was
Sorry.
said, I don't know what was said before I walked in, but to me, increasingly, it's a reminder that all are precious before the Lord, uniquely precious. And even as we go in and intercede, remembering that the people we're interceding for are precious in the Lord's sight.
Yeah, for sure.
She stole my words.
It says here that his breastplate of judgment is on his heart. Verse 29.
Yeah. So there's this representation, but also this. I feel like there's always kind of two sides to everything, right? It's like there's this like everybody in the presence, and also everybody is judged.
Yeah.
It's like everybody is close to his heart, and also everybody is. There's a requirement. There's obedience required. There's all these things, and also the Lord loves all of his people, regardless of whether they're Aaron going into the Holy of Holies or somebody from another tribe who may never actually get to set foot inside the tabernacle itself. But all are represented, and all are held accountable to being obedient to the instruction that they're given.
Well, and then just the part of it, then there's the mercy seat.
Yeah.
Over the judgment. So
right.
He does extend mercy.
For sure.
For those who repent. And
yeah, that's good. Yeah.
I have friends that he lived in Israel for many years, so he speaks fluent, like modern Hebrew, but he also is like a master of like the Hebrew text. And so I love asking him questions, and I asked him the list of stones given, like how many of those names of those stones that appear in the Torah are like modern Hebrew words that are used, for stones. Not many. I believe it was either 3 or 4. That was it.
Interesting.
So most of them. That's why we have a hard time identifying what they were. Because like an onyx is like black, but it's highly likely that that was not, the case with whatever they're calling, whatever was translated into the word onyx, that it was different. But that word, notice it appeared very early in Scripture, like Genesis 2:12. Where it mentions it's alongside with gold, and there's one other thing it mentions. So obviously very precious from the very beginning, pages of Scripture, very precious. But it's interesting because the onyx is on the shoulders, but it's also one of the stones on the breastplate. It's like in the 4th row in the middle. It's the same stone, onyx. So I don't know, there's a lot of mystery there. I think there's a lot we don't know.
Right.
But it's tough. I guess the commentators are just saying it's fraught with problems trying to properly, accurately identify, well, what was this? Good luck.
Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things about the tabernacle, because we read through and we're like, whoa, there's so much detail. Everything is so specific. And yet, if you were to go and try to actually physically do this, you would realize that there's actually a lot of information and things missing, which is also really interesting. And I mean, there's all kinds of thoughts we could have about that, but yeah, Lori.
So with the stones, and I thought about this before because, the font size, of what you're trying to engrave on there, like, they didn't have like the laser tools to do little. So we're looking at something of a size to be able to put 6 tribes on each. And the Lord didn't say, weave their name in linen. He picked something that was heavy, so that whatever they were carrying the weight of those tribes in. And to have just these 2 large stones, to me they'd have to be fairly decent in size to have these names engraved on them. The weight on his shoulders, like he's carrying the weight on his shoulders into the Lord. And so I found it fascinating, because I thought the Lord could have made this easy on the priest and just embroidered it in like linen, and then there you go. But he wanted that symbolism of the weight. And then you add that breastplate with the other 12 stones on it, and then you put of course we don't know how.
Right.
I'm going to see if you'd go there today. But, just the weight of everything that he's carrying, layers upon layers, just like the tabernacle was layers upon layers. Yeah. And so he's like this physical example of another layer of going in before the Lord. So.
Yeah, I think all this stuff, all these garments, I think it would be quite heavy. It's like, yes, your base layer is linen, so that's pretty light, which is kind of the Lord's very light fabric underneath everything. But then by the time you have all these stones and all this gold, because then it even talks about the bells and the pomegranates, which were very small, which they actually have found. This is like the fun archaeological fact, is like they've found one of the pomegranates, at least, I think.
Wow, crazy.
Which is, well, we don't need to go there.
So wait. So the pomegranates, do you think those were like physical objects, or they were embroidered onto the hem of his garment?
Well, it says that they're gold.
Okay.
So.
Like little bells, right?
Yeah, the bells and the pomegranates. Yeah, and they were gold. So they would jingle. So he's supposed to make sound as he's walking, which is, there's multiple practical reasons for that too.
An ounce of gold is the size of a 50-cent piece. So it's not that heavy.
Right, but by the time you have them all the way around, and you have all this other stuff, like it's still, so the gold is maybe not the bulk of the weight, but it's still like, there's a lot of heaviness to what he's wearing.
Yeah, it's
which goes back to, which seems to be intentional, because kind of like what Lori was mentioning down in verse 29, this is after it continues talking about the breastplate and the ephod and all the rings and how, the construction of all this, basically. It says, Aaron will bear the names of Bnei Israel in the breastplate of judgment on his heart whenever he enters the holy place as a continual memorial before Adonai. Also put the Urim and the Thummim within the breastplate of judgment, So they will be on Aaron's heart when he goes in before Adonai. Aaron will bear the judgment of Bnei Israel on his heart before Adonai continually. So it does seem that there's some intentionality, that he's feeling the weight of what he's doing, of how he's representing the people, and kind of bearing this kind of weight of judgment as he's going before the Lord. So it does, to me, it does seem like there's some intentionality in the weight, which I think is helpful, you know, right? Like I like there's so many things like we've talked about before, like this ancient mindset is so, they don't know how to separate the spiritual and the physical. So the intentionality behind all of these garments, from the materials that they're made of, to the weight of it, to the how it's constructed, and all of these things, I think that there is this understanding that it's not just a physical garment. It is part of this relationship with the Lord, in a sense, which I think is really interesting. So yeah, but anyway, all that to say, I do think that there's a purpose to the weight that he's bearing as he goes in before the Lord. So I wasn't going to get down into the weeds of the Urim and the Thummim, but I guess if anybody has any comments, we can. Christina wants to say something about it.
No, I just wanted to hear what you had to say.
I don't have a whole lot to say about it.
The Urim and is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's an interesting conversation.
It's so interesting.
Because there's so much mixture happening right now.
Oh, yeah.
Too. And
yeah.
so it's just a conversation that's ongoing in my mind, as to like, how do we tap into hearing the Lord without making it witchcraft? And I feel like this is one of those pieces that I feel like it's lost and yet is connected to that.
That's good. So. Yeah, I'm not as well studied in all of that as you are, so I don't have all the things to say about it. But I think it is a good conversation, and you're right, because it's different than, you know, it can feel like there's no difference between, some of these ways of gaining knowledge through witchcraft versus seems like there's these two objects that the Lord is speaking through, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like, how do you draw some of those distinctions? And I mean, it's a long and detailed conversation, I think. Yeah.
Tom, I think on one of the Grafted Ambassadors things, did a whole teaching on that.
I think you did talk about this one time.
And of course, the one thing I found fascinating, or I liked about it, was the meanings of the two words. Mm-hmm. I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Urim, which actually means lights, and the Thummim, which means perfect. So you've got perfect lights, and so when they're inquiring to him, I found that, like, that teaching alone, just thinking about these things, this is like, when they're inquiring of him, they're asking him to shed light on something, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, whether it's dice or, you know, I don't even want to get into the, you know, like they rolled the dice and, you know.
Yeah.
But
but
it still has to do with inquiring of the Lord. He still gave them a means to inquire of him once Moses was no longer in that position to do that for him.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, okay,
mm-hmm.
I'm out of here. It's like, no, I'm still giving you a way
right.
to get understanding from me.
Yeah, and we know that after, like, Moses is, of course, right, is this really unique figure, right? Mm-hmm. And after Moses, when we have, we know the priestly line continues through Aaron's sons specifically, but then Joshua becomes the leader, the military leader, really, of Israel. And so we start to see some, like, separation of duties and responsibility, right? And so, but they're all supposed to work together, right? And so then I think the idea is that Joshua would be working with the priest, and they would kind of be inquiring it would be on both of them to inquire of the Lord and make these judgments. And whereas right now we just have Moses that's kind of, even though Aaron is the high priest, Moses is also still going into the presence of the Lord. So it's a little bit of a different structure. But that's not going to continue. And so, yeah, I think there's this idea. And also I think something that's important is, like, God specifically made this structure of judging these things, but it wasn't meant to be duplicated. So it's not like you're supposed to have this happening in each of your homes, right? And of course, I mean, but then it's like we have the question of like, because we know that like casting lots became a common practice and different things, and people were understanding that the Lord was speaking through all of that. And that makes the conversation bigger too. But in the case of these specific things, it's not like everybody is supposed to walk around with this on, So,
And
so
is this part of just the high priest
yes.
outfit?
Yeah,
So
it's
this is-
just the high priest.
So does that mean he would only wear it once a year, the Urim and the Thummim?
No, I don't think so. I think he would wear it when he would go. I mean, he would only go into the Holy of Holies once a year, but he's going into the tabernacle, into the inner court, into the holy place to minister every day. So I think it would be worn every day when he goes into minister, is my understanding.
Yeah.
But there's probably different ways to understand that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
The thing that I have says that the Urim and Thummim were placed in the breastplate. So
Mhm.
it may have had the front part, you see the stones in the pocket on the back side. It would seem that would be a good place because you would have your desire to hear God's thing right over your heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's specifically instructed, to be right over his heart. So, yeah. Is there somebody else that's going to say something? Yeah.
Just to add something to this, to the discussion of the weight, which I think is so good to bring out, like Lori's brought out, you've brought out. It's like the Lord continues that spiritually for us to discern. Like if you've had words from the Lord, there's some that just, I'll pray about it, but it doesn't alight, it doesn't land. But when you hear a real word from the Lord from someone truly gifted in the prophetic, there's a weight to it that you take seriously, and you can hold on to it for very, very long.
Yeah.
Because there's witness because of that weight.
Yeah. That's true, for sure. Do you have anything else you want to add, Christina?
No, that's the conversation.
One quick thing. So I feel like the Urim and the Thummim, it seemed like it was under authority, so it was a very special, exclusive thing. It's not something you used every day.
For sure.
This is like for national, level
Right.
decisions, very important things. David used it more than anyone, but he would consult the high priest. He wouldn't do it himself.
Right.
So it's kind of like working, as you said, like working together. It's kind of like it's under authority. It's not, this thing is not like a loose cannon that anyone can just do whatever they want with it, like witchcraft.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So there seems to be a difference, but yeah, pretty fascinating that they could get an immediate answer in terms of what needed to be done.
Yeah.
Which is that's a really good point, but then we have like Holy Spirit who's now in all of us, right?
Right.
So like there's not a
That's different,
like a specific something we come to.
Right.
Because we do have the Holy Spirit, so we can
Yeah.
talk to him directly. We don't need something else outside of him.
Although the Lord will use the gifts, like a true prophetic gift. When you hear, I'm just bearing witness in my own life. When someone who is truly gifted with that reads your mail, brings you a word that no way could they have known that. But again, that weight that it carries, and you see that it bears witness and coming to pass too, all those kinds of things. But yes, to what you say, except then with the different gifts operating.
I just think it's just that opens the conversation into like the difference between authority and ultimate power too, right? Like, and then our intimacy and walk with the Lord, and how does that change those versus how does he pick specific people for specific roles?
Coffee. Again, so we're gonna have coffee over all these things. Invite others. Yeah, that's what I mean,
I might just point out though that in the second chapter of Acts, after the Spirit had been given, they did still, when they replaced Judas, they did
cast
nominate
lots.
a couple, and then they cast lots.
Right.
To actually pick.
Yeah. So there's and that's like I'm saying, that's a whole other conversation.
I guess that was before the times of fire.
Yeah.
In the temple.
Yes, because that was probably that was before, but so, and that gets into that's a longer conversation I think that we have time for. I would say also that in this situation, especially when the tabernacle is first built and the Lord fills it with his presence, it's like there's like a visible presence of the Lord there, you know, which as we go through time becomes more complicated, because the Lord's presence falls and fills the tabernacle, the Lord's presence falls and fills the first temple, the Lord's presence does not fall and fill the second temple. So things get increasingly more complicated as we go, and we're not gonna chase that rabbit today. But I know, it's so interesting. But I want to get to more things. But so yes, but I think that what do I want to say? I don't want to get in trouble. Christina's going to catch me if I say it wrong. I'm just kidding. But I think that as a general rule, I think that we see that, yes, there were these objects that were used to make decisions, but again, like we're saying, like we are now filled with the Holy Spirit. So I would say, but also the Lord is kind, so he shows up through things that maybe he wouldn't necessarily be his first choice, but he wants to speak to his people, so he'll speak through things to get people's attention. So it's hard to make I don't want to make too strong of statements, but I would say as a general rule, we are not meant to use objects to be discerning the will of the Lord. We're meant to, and I think a big piece of that is that, one, yes, we have the Holy Spirit in us. We have the very presence of God in us. And it's also important to know his character and who he really is, so that we can discern, because we also have we also have our own self. We have, the enemy's always trying to get our attention. So we have these other voices that are competing for our attention. But knowing the character of the Lord can help us a lot in discerning what's true and what's not. And sometimes we need other people to help us do that. And that is okay, because we're meant to do it in community. Because again, this is, so these decisions that are made with this are, like we're saying, they're universal, nationwide decisions. They're not, they're not trivial little everyday things. These are really big things. That it's really important that the Lord is really clear on. And so I would say that often, I know in my own life I've experienced where I felt like the Lord has said something that is like a big life-shifting decision, and it's important that I have processed that with other people. Because it helps me gain confidence in yes, the Lord really did say, and also helps to point out maybe the blind sides or the incomplete information or different ways of understanding what I think the Lord is saying. And I think when we do it together, we are more likely to find the Lord in it. So we'll move on from there, if that's okay. Okay. But I think at the end of the day, the Lord does still desire to speak to his people and to guide us and to give us wisdom, especially in really important areas, but even in smaller ones. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about, let's see here. Okay, so then it goes on, of course, he has, finish up this little, this section about the garments themselves. So we talked about the bells and the pomegranates on the hem of the robe, because it says, and this is 28:35, it must be worn by Aaron whenever he ministers. The sound will be heard when he goes into the holy place before Adonai and when he comes out, so that he does not die. So this is all important. And I think, I'll just mention this. So I think, because it's like God, does God need Aaron's presence announced by the ringing of these bells? No, he doesn't. But think about this culture that they're in, and we haven't gotten into the portions of the Torah that talk about clean and unclean and all the ritual purity and all these things yet. But we know that this is part of the culture, and so part of the response. So Aaron has the high priest has these specific instructions for this level of purity they're to maintain, and also the rest of the people are responsible for also helping him maintain that. Meaning, they, it's helpful to know he's coming if he's ringing bells, so that you don't accidentally, I don't know, if you're unclean and touch him and make him unclean and all these things. And I know that sometimes that framework is really hard for our modern brains to understand, but it's part of this helping preserve his own state of purity, so that he can go into the presence of the Lord, and also connecting that with the fact that he is walking into the presence of the Lord bearing the names and of everyone else and representing everyone else. And so there's that aspect to it, which I think is really interesting. So it's not just about him, it's not just about him, like him gaining attention and all these things. It's about him being able to enter the presence of the Lord in the right state, in the way that's commanded. Okay, so
verse 38 reiterates what you were just saying there too.
Yeah. Yes.
Talking about, the hat, the plate, all of that, and it says it will rest on Aaron's forehead, so that Aaron will bear away the iniquity committed regarding the holy things which Bnei Israel set apart for all their holy gifts. It will always be on his forehead, so that he may have favor before Adonai. So this is like taking away iniquity, standing before the Lord.
Yeah.
This is what, like, in a nutshell, the whole sacrificial system, it's being able to have community or communion with the Lord, stand before the Lord, take away your sin and present yourself before the Lord. And that's what they're setting up here, to remove any sin from within God's sacred space, so that once again, like in the garden, man can walk with the Lord.
Yeah, it's all about being in the presence of the Lord.
Yeah.
Like, it's about being in the presence of the Lord, keeping the presence of the manifest presence of the Lord in the midst of the people. It's all about, it's relational. It's very much like God is like, I want to be with you. So let me teach you how to be a people that we can be together in the midst of this crazy world that we have. Okay, so then the next chapter goes into the consecration, and so we start to talk about all of these sacrifices and offerings that are made as part of this consecration process. And again, I'm not intending to get down into the weeds of all of that, but yeah. So there's a lot of animals. There's a lot of specifics about how they're supposed to do this, right? And again, like these offerings of these animals, this is the part that the majority of the people were able to at least witness, and so there's significance to all of that. So I'm going to read a section from the end of 29. So it gives all of the instructions and all the details about how they're to do all of this. And I think I'm going to start in verse 35. It says, "Do for Aaron and his sons everything according to what I have commanded you. Consecrate them for 7 days. Each day you are to offer a bull as a sin offering, apart from the other offerings of atonement. Also purify the altar when you make atonement for it, and anoint it in order to sanctify it. You are to make atonement for the altar for 7 days and to sanctify it. The altar will be most holy, and whatever touches it will become holy. Now this is what you are to offer upon the altar: 2 one-year-old lambs each day continually. You are to offer 1 lamb in the morning and the other lamb at dusk. Offer with the first lamb 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with 1/4 of a hin of beaten oil and 1/4 of a hin of wine as a drink offering. The other lamb you are to offer at dusk, like the grain offering and drink offering of the morning, as a sweet aroma, an offering made by fire to Adonai. It is to be a continual burnt offering throughout your generations at the entrance of the tent of meeting before Adonai. There I will meet with you and to speak with you there. I will meet with Bnei Israel there, so it will be sanctified by my glory. So I will sanctify the tent of meeting and the altar. I will also sanctify Aaron and his sons to minister to me as Kohanim. So I will dwell among Bnei Israel and be their God. Then they will know that I am Adonai their God, who brought them forth out of the land of Egypt, so that I may live among them. I am Adonai their God." So There's so many things I love about this. But, so there's to be this continual burnt offering on the altar, which again, like I said, is the part that everyone can see. Everybody can see it, they can smell it, they can hear it. So this is significant. This is a part of this worship to the Lord that everybody gets to be a part of. And it says it will be sanctified by his glory. So, and it talks about that this is supposed to be showing them that he is the God who brought them out of Egypt so that he can dwell with them. All of this, the whole point of it is so that he can dwell among the people. So I know we say that a lot, but I think it's just really important. I just don't feel like we can say it too much. And it makes me happy so every time I read it. Yeah, and the TLB says so that I may live among them, but other translations will say so that I can dwell among them. So
What's the difference?
I think that it's this I think it's this dwelling is kind of this actually being with them, where it's you can I kind of think of it as the difference of you can live near people your whole life and not actually know them, but if you're dwelling with them, there's more intimacy to it, I would say. So it's you're actually interacting and engaging and doing life together, so to speak.
Okay.
So that's how I would say it. I like in Dennis Prager's commentary, he points out a few things about this this affirmation of God that he took them out of Egypt so that he can live with them or dwell among them or whatever. And these are a couple of points that he brings out. He says he did not just create the world, but he continues to take an active role in human history. He cares about human suffering. He wants people to be free. And he has a special role for the Jewish people, which is why he took them out of Egypt, which is connected to their calling as a light to the nations. So he brought them out of, right, there's this, I think it's important that we don't lose sight of this fact that he brought them out of slavery and oppression and into freedom, even though sometimes sometimes people look at the Torah as all these rules and restrictions, and it's but actually it brings freedom, right? When you know how to live and you get to, it brings blessing and abundance, right? And we've talked about before all these passages that it talks about, God is very clear of if you are obedient, these are the blessings that you receive, and you have my presence among you. And if you choose to live a different way, then my presence can't be with you, and these are all the consequences for all of that. And so he's doing all of this to bring fullness of life, right? It's not meant to be this life of slavery and oppression that they experienced in Egypt. Anything else about that before I move on? And we talk about the altar of incense because it's really fun.
Ask at the end. Keep going.
Okay. Okay, so the incense altar is the last little portion that we have in this week's portion. And I think, let's see. It's not very long. I think I'll read this section and then we can talk about it. Okay. You are to make an altar of acacia wood for burning incense. It is to be square, 1 cubit in length, 1 cubit in width, and 2 cubits high. The horns must be of one piece with it. You are to overlay it with pure gold on top, all around the sides and over the horns. Also, you are to make a crown of gold for it all around. Make 2 golden rings for it under the crown on the 2 sides, and they will be the holders for the poles to carry it. Make the poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. You are to set it in front of the curtain that is in front of the Ark of the Testimony, in front of the atonement cover that is over the testimony where I will meet with you. Aaron must burn sweet spices of incense there every morning. When he attends to the lamps, he is to burn it. So when Aaron keeps the lamps lit at dusk, he must burn it. There must be incense continually before Adonai throughout your generations. You must not offer up unauthorized incense on it, nor should any burnt offering or grain offering be there. Nor should you pour any drink offering there. Aaron is to make atonement upon the horns once a year with the blood of the sin offering throughout your generations. It is most holy to Adonai. Okay. One, I just really enjoy all the specifics, even like, these are the rings so that you have poles so that you can carry it, because this thing has to be mobile. And I'm like, it's so practical. I love that. I don't know. I enjoy things like that. And so also I like, so like thinking about the, this inner court. So you have the incense altar in kind of in the middle, right in front of the veil or the curtain that would lead into the Holy of Holies. And then you also have the golden menorah and the table of showbread in this space. So like we mentioned at the beginning, there's this light continually burning that Aaron is to be tending to morning and evening, right, in the golden menorah. And then there's also this incense that's supposed to be burning all of the time, as well as this kind of showbread. So, let's see. So we have we've seen at this point basically that, sorry, apparently I can't turn pages and talk at the same time. You would have thought I could do that, but I can't. Anyway, okay, so we've seen about this tabernacle, we've talked about it already. The tabernacle engages all of these senses. The priests can smell the incense, they taste the sacrificial offerings, they're feeling the sacrificial blood, they see the light of the menorah, and then they're hearing the bells on their clothing. So there's all the senses are engaged in all of this. So there's some really interesting connections that Morales is making with the incense in my favorite little "Who Shall Ascend the Mountain of the Lord" book. So I kind of want to actually go through a pretty decent section of this and talk about some of these things, because it connects us back to Sinai and also connects us forward, which of course is one of my favorite things about the tabernacle. Okay, so I'm going to read some decent chunks here, but we'll talk about them as we go. Okay, so he says, grasping the correspondence between the mountain summit and the Holy of Holies is especially vital as we consider the altar of incense. When Moses had ascended Sinai, the cloud covered the mountain, and after 6 days Adonai called to Moses out of the cloud, and Moses, we read, entered the midst of the cloud and ascended the mountain. So properly understood, God's glory is manifested by fire. Probably then we are to understand the cloud as a veil covering God's glory, explaining how the cloud was seen by day, but only fire was seen by night through the cloud, because it conceals as much as it reveals. The cloud is a powerful symbol for this divine presence. Another author rightly grounds this function theologically in the words of God to Moses, "You cannot see my face, for man may not see me and live." Okay, so let's talk about that. So there's this idea of the cloud on the mountain, right? It talks about in Exodus 24 that the cloud, this glory cloud, covers the mountain as Moses is going up. And so they're drawing this parallel, basically, that God's glory kind of needs this veil. It's almost this veil of protection, which is what we'll continue to talk about as we go on. So they're painting this picture of this kind of veil, this cloud as a veil as they're going up Sinai. So let me keep going, because then we'll get some more connections here. Okay, as such, the cloud becomes a symbol for both for divine immanence and transcendence. More to the point, because one may not see God and live, the cloud is a protective screen, a shield for the one who ascends into the divine presence. We see this function for the altar of incense first in its placement within the tabernacle, because it says, place the altar of incense before the veil, that is before the ark of the testimony, before the atonement cover that is over the testimony, where I will meet with you. And that's what we just read in Exodus 30. The altar's incense thereby imparts its fragrance in conjunction with the veil covering the meeting place of God's presence. So so he's making this connection that with the altar of incense, which as incense is burning, right, there's a cloud or smoke that is rising from it. That's right before the veil. So he's connecting it, saying that it's this, it's another part of this veil of protection in some sense between the holy place and where God's presence is in the Holy of Holies. So, okay, let's keep going. One more, I think I've only got one more section. And then hopefully it'll all make sense. Okay, so then also within the instructions for the only permissible entrance into the Holy of Holies, and that by the high priest alone on the annual Day of Atonement, the high priest is to take a censer full of burning coals from the altar, along with a fistful of finely beaten sweet incense, and so create a cloud of incense in order to cover the atonement cover, the meeting place where God appears, lest he dies. Clearly, the veil of the curtain must be replaced by the veil of the cloud of incense, lest Aaron, even as consecrated high priest of Israel, see the face of God and perish. Thus, Aaron's need for the cloud within the holiest corresponds well with Moses' need for the cloud at Sinai's summit. Only with the protective screen of the cloud, the symbolic perpetuation of the cloud at Sinai can the high priest enter into God's presence. So I know that was a lot of things, but basically it's because Aaron has commanded to take this. He takes some of the incense, he takes some of the coals from it into the Holy of Holies with him. It's as if this cloud is preceding him into God's presence. And it becomes this veil similar to this cloud at the Sinai that Moses saw God through or experienced with God, however you want to look at that, is that incense is part of this this covering as you go into the presence of the Lord, which I think is just a really interesting connection to this Sinai experience within the tabernacle itself. And then he goes on to talk about how, like, because he's taking these coals and things, there's this fire, which we also know is part of the Sinai experience, and is part of what everyone can see. And so there's also this connection with the scent and the smoke of it, as like, because when Moses is up on Sinai, right, all the people are not up there, but there's cloud and fire and lightning and all these things happening up there. So everyone still feels and hears and experiences the presence of God, even though they're not in it. And with this incense going in, there's a similar aspect of that, because the people would be able to smell it and would know that he's taking this in, and even though they can't be there physically with him, there's still this communal participation in it. So, does all of that sort of make sense? That was a lot of things. But I like that it's showing this, I don't know, because I feel like, at least for me, the incense has been something that has been harder to relate to as part of it. It's like, okay, so they have this, particular blend of spices that they're burning, which would be this smell thing. So there was a particular blend that they wouldn't use for anything else. So if they would smell it burning, they would associate that with the tabernacle. And of course, we know that smell is a really powerful, right, link to memory and connection. And so there's obviously that. But even, I just think it's really interesting of the way of entering God's presence. There's this, it emphasizes some of the reverence and how it's important how we enter God's presence. I'll stop talking for a second. Maybe let that sink in for a second before we look at some of the going forward connections with some of the incense.
That's what I'm waiting for.
That's what you're waiting for? Okay. I can keep going. Okay, so the other, I'll just keep going then. And then we'll see what else everyone wants to say. Okay, so incense is also, becomes this kind of analogy for intercession. So, if I can, oh gosh, I'm there. I have my finger in the right book and I'm just going right past it. So for example, and these will be probably familiar passages to most of you, but there's this idea of incense being like intercession rising up before the Lord. So in Psalm 141, which is the Psalm of David, I'll just read the first couple verses of it. David says, Adonai, I call to you. Come quickly to me. Hear my voice when I call to you. Make my prayer be set before you like incense. May the lifting of my hands be like the evening sacrifice. So we have talked about, and I mentioned in my message last week, that after the temple is destroyed, prayer in the synagogue services kind of, in some sense, takes the place of sacrifices. But there's this understanding that intercession is but they still have the tabernacle. David has the tabernacle, right? And so there's still this emphasis on prayer then, and he's even connecting it to this incense that's constantly rising to the Lord, this sweet aroma that's constantly going up to the Lord, as that prayer or intercession is that same type of sweet aroma and offering, I guess you could say, rising up to the Lord.
Well,
yeah. Sorry. I saw Sam first.
Is there, this use of incense, is it used for any other reason in the culture, or in that culture, or is it all centered around and restricted to its use in the temple?
I mean, I think incense was used in a lot of ways in the ancient world, but this is the only instruction for using it in worship that I'm aware of. I mean, other cultures and other other nations would be using incense as well. Like, it was a common something that was used in worship and things like that. But as far as I can remember, it is only instructed to be used in the tabernacle by God. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I guess I've never put together that David is a priest, right? So
right.
He didn't actually go and offer the incense.
Right.
So, like, his cry is like, I want to be that close that my prayers would be as incense to you. Mm-hmm. I don't know, that was somehow comforting to my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, which if you think about, like, David as a worshiper, right?
Right.
To not be able to, like, enter into the inner parts of the tabernacle where God's presence was is an interesting thing, but we learn so much about worship and this heart of worship from him, right? And God calls him a man after his own heart and somebody who wants to connect with him. So yeah, we see this connection, even though he's not.
Yeah.
Like, I do think it would hit differently if it was a priest writing this.
Yeah.
Right? But if David, again, it goes back to this connection of, like, David's not going in, but he's as the king, he's closely connected with the priesthood.
Well, he's supposed to know how it all works.
Right. Yeah.
Because I mean, he's written it all.
Right.
out.
He would have written the whole Torah, and he knows all the instructions. He knows everything that's happened, and he also would have this close relationship.
Right.
Right. Like, prophet, priest, and king are all supposed to be very close and very, leading actually together, because they all have their own specific roles to play. So I think even David connecting in with this is significant as well. Yeah.
And now that you said this, which kind of makes me happy, thinking about, David writing the Torah scroll, which he was required to do as a king, but he had to do it with priests. So he's also going to know, because he had to write this all out, if the priests that are in service there are doing their job correctly too. So you've got this, the priest over him making sure that he's writing this right, so that he's not exalting himself. And we see, because he's writing this out, the priest realizing, and the king also knows what my responsibilities are. And so you do see this joint community where you have the priests and kings working together to make sure that what God wanted is walked out properly. And the fact that that's still being done, at King David's time, because really we're hoping maybe Solomon also followed the practice of writing out the Torah, but we don't really have too many examples of knowing if kings actually did this.
Right.
But because we know that David was a man after God's own heart.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can reasonably probably assume that some kings were doing it, because when we get to, like, Kings and Chronicles, we see this back and forth of this king was good and was obedient, and this king wasn't, and I think part of that obedience
Was knowing the law.
Was knowing the law.
Yeah.
So I think it's reasonable to assume that the kings who were considered obedient were doing that. Even though it doesn't say that, I think that's a reasonable conclusion to draw. And so, because of the blessings that we see and how we see things functioning properly, so I think they have to be doing some of that for that to be happening. But yeah, I mean, you're right, it is a good example of like, they're doing this how it's supposed to be done, right? Everybody has their role and their things that they're assigned to do, and they're doing it without kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like taking over each other's
Competition?
without competition and without, overbearing from anyone, which is important. Yeah.
I was looking and I just found in Revelation 5:8 where it does connect, the incense. When they had taken the book, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints.
So Revelation is actually where I was going next. So you're moving us along, which is great. We've got like 10 minutes left. We're doing so well, you guys. So we have in Revelation, in Revelation 5, it's this worship of the Lamb. So we have this incense, which are the prayers of the Kedoshim, or the holy ones, the ones who are faithful. And then also, if we go another place in Revelation where it mentions this is in Revelation 8, which is the 7th seal. And I'll just read a couple verses of this, starting in verse 1. So now when the Lamb opened the 7th seal, there was a silence in heaven for about half an hour. Then I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. Another angel came and stood at the altar, holding a golden incense burner. He was given much incense to offer up, along with the prayers of all the Kedoshim, upon the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the Kedoshim rose before God from the angel's hand. And then the angel took the incense burner and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it to the earth. And there were clashes of thunder and rumblings and flashing of lightning and earthquakes, which also reminds us of Sinai. So it seems like God is very consistent in how he is communicating, which I appreciate. But anyway, this is another example of, even at the end of the story, we have this incense, and it's connecting it with the prayers of the faithful ones of the Kedoshim. And then finally, we have Yeshua himself connected with this, which is the best part. And this is one of the things I love about Hebrews is all of these Yeshua connections it makes to the tabernacle service. And of course we call, in Hebrews 4:14, Yeshua is called our great high priest. In Hebrews 4:14 it says, therefore, since we have a great Kohen Gadol high priest who passed through the heavens, Yeshua the Son of God, let us hold firmly to our confessed allegiance. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all the same ways, yet without sin. Therefore, let us draw near to the throne of grace with boldness, so that we may receive mercy and grace for help in time of need. So if we kind of draw the parallel, right? It's like the high priest is the one, right, who is tending to the altar of incense, to the golden menorah, to this aroma that's rising to the Lord, and to this light that's shining. And Yeshua embodies those things, right? And then in Hebrews, in 7:25, it talks about that he is the one with a permanent priesthood right before that. And then it's in 25, it says, therefore he is also able to save completely those who draw near to God through him, always living to make intercession for them. So it talks that, and then in Hebrews 8:34 is the verse that we often reference as that Yeshua is at the right hand of the Father, interceding for us. And so he embodies this role of intercession. That is what he's doing on our behalf in this kind of in-between age that we currently live in. So if we kind of roll all that together with this idea of this incense being something that kind of, in some sense, I would say, leads the way into the presence of the Lord, and we're also connecting that with intercession, which should, of course, connect us in with the presence of, hopefully we're connecting and we're coming into the presence of the Lord when we're interceding. And then Yeshua embodying the presence of God himself, as well as his role as an intercessor. It makes this really significant. So I just really like all of these. I like that it connects with this Sinai experience, that it takes them back to this presence of God on the mountain, and that it's also this continual connection into the presence of the Lord through both like this holiness aspect as well as intercession. So that's the whole picture. I made it through the whole thing. So thoughts? Yeah.
I'm going through like the present and what you're talking about. And my family in the Far East, they're thinking of doing like a dedication where you have the Catholics and the Buddhists, and then we have our family. They want to like do the incense and the whole thing, and I'm thinking, as you're doing this, I said, wow, this is two different worship. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we shouldn't be participating because so many things were just coming up, and I'm just saying, oh wait, it still applies to this day, just like the casting of the lots, because that has happened too. But that was for the good thing, I think. And then now you've got the incense, and I'm thinking, wow, they're going to do it in March. Do we go back there to participate? I'm thinking, because it's two different gods.
Yeah. Buddhism.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, it gives me the chills now.
Oh, well.
Well, and as a former Catholic, it's chilling to consider, so many commandments in the scriptures, they just flagrantly look away, don't make images.
And they just
Don't
mix
bow
the
to
whole
images.
thing, yeah. Because I remember as little kids, we were not allowed to eat the sacrifice food at the
house and not looking at his word, right? And not knowing what he's saying, as opposed to trying to figure out how to have it's a twisted thing, right? Because we want to have intimacy with the Lord, and that can feel sometimes like having power. So the enemy wants us to learn how to have power, and he perverts different practices to get us to have power, and it's twisted.
You're right, and because you were saying, it's all about bringing glory to God.
Yes.
Everything.
Yeah.
And they're saying maybe we can have what is that term? Where all the religions come in, since we are that and they are that.
This universal
Ecumenical.
reality.
Yeah. For this thing, because it's like they're redoing it. It's like,
No. Yeah.
so that's not kosher.
No.
Okay.
There's only one
I
God.
mean, I'm just thinking, well, you
Yeshua
have the
says he's the
veil.
only way to the Father.
Okay, now how about the service that they had in the Bible where they had Baal and the worship of God? And how?
That was what you mean with Elisha?
Yeah.
Where he was saying, show me what your God can do, and I'll show you what my God can do. It wasn't let us all come together and worship. There wasn't a service of let us all have fun together and come to the same God.
Thank you.
This was God's gonna show you who he is, and you're gonna see that Baal is nothing.
It was a challenge.
It was a challenge.
It wasn't
Yeah,
a
it's
preach
similar
to the ones who God
it's
was.
similar to God demonstrating his power when they're bringing them out of Egypt, because all of the plagues are connected to Egyptian gods, and so it's all God showing I am the true God, and you are your little g gods are not as powerful as me.
Okay, so another question. Tell members of my family not to even participate then, if that's the case.
I would encourage them not to.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. If they're
Maybe
saying
that's
all,
what I
all
want,
of
okay.
it.
Yeah.
I would definitely encourage them.
No, actually, are,
I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
okay,
It's good.
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, know who you're
Life
playing
in the
now.
All right.
Put the blame on us.
Hey, it's all going on like what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think that it's, you know, it can be very costly at times to stand for what's right, and, I saw it years ago in my own family where, I was raised Catholic, and when my mom came to faith, everybody cut us off, all the relatives, all the friends, so whatever, it's just almost sort of like Orthodox Judaism, you're dead, you know, you can't participate, you can't be part, you know, long term, you know, so it's costly. I think that's where Yeshua says, I came not to send peace but a sword. I think that's applicable in some of these situations where he draws a line, he divides right down the middle in terms of his people from this other stuff that's going on, but it can be costly, you know, personally costly, relationally costly. So
Yeah. Can be hard.
we'll pray for your strength,
Yeah.
wisdom.
Well,
Family, yeah.
for me, it's okay because I'm here, but it's the others.
Okay.
You know, I'm just saying, okay, our generation, there is a difference here.
Yeah.
My mom's generation, she had to bow down to the dead, and she rose up and said, no, I can't do that, my God will not allow me to do that.
Wow. Yeah.
And, but then I feel like this, okay, thank you for the clarity.
Yeah.
So if I can, I just wanna point out something that I also thought was really interesting, maybe just a little bit of a shifting in my mind frame about the Holy of Holies and intercession. Cause I'm just connecting it to worship too, right? So often trying to walk through, in my mind, in the tabernacle, when we're going through worship, to be able to get to the Holy of Holies. But this last couple of weeks or months, I've been realizing that the Holy of Holies is about interceding. Like it's not just about this experience of intimacy, because once you get to the place of fully seeing intimacy, there's a recognition of His holiness, which leads us into this place of crying out for those that we love. And so as we get closer in that incense, in that prayer, it's like, why does it cloud us is because we're unholy, but as we ask for forgiveness and we're being covered by His blood, then we're able to enter into that place. And then when we're into that place, now we're interceding for those who are outside.
Ooh, I love that picture.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool. Like,
Yeah. And I think there's also this, I like just connected with that, like even going in, it's like, I think with the incense too, it's not just about the cloud, it's about the fragrance. Because if you think about like, you know, like when you walk through, when you, like, if you're in a place that is very fragrant, words are hard, and you leave, you carry that, right? It's in your clothes. So it's like, Aaron or the high priest is carrying that fragrance too. So it's connected with, like, you become part of that fragrance that is called this sweet aroma before the Lord. So I think there's that connection too. So it's just, it's so good. All right, well, thank you, Lord.